What's up, everybody? Back with another Survivor video, and going to do our best to review the slate of games this week so we can advance on to week 3 in the NFL season. Luckily, this week's games are much easier than last week's. You see a lot of games favored by a touchdown plus. Makes it a lot easier to pick. I think you got some great value across the board here, but a lot of familiar favorites that you're going to see a lot this season that are going to be favored by a lot of points here. When you get these perennial and weekly great teams, then that's when the strategy comes into play a little bit more as well. Now, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to me, and especially if you're coming back to these videos week in and week out. Why not? It also will expose you to the other NFL content that this channel puts out as well. You know, as always, when you're looking at these weekly picks, you want to, plan ahead a little bit and take a look at the agenda for the rest of the teams in the upcoming weeks. You see that, again, with these really great teams and Super Bowl hopefuls, you're going to have them in situations many times this year where you're going to pick them. But you got to start to figure out which weeks you might want to take them. And if it makes sense to take them this week, depending on what the board shows and depending on what they have in later weeks. But I'll start this video again, as we always do, with the teams to proceed with caution. I'll be honest, I think a lot of these picks, if not most of them, seem pretty blatantly good picks across the board. But I'm going to pick out a few that I would be a little more cautious than I think others might be. And to start, that's going to be this game with the Lions. I just think that -7 spread is a little misleading, given that the Buccaneers just put up 37 points, albeit against the Washington Commanders. And this Buccaneers team was a playoff team last year. They've certainly shown the ability to put up points. And the Lions, that are coming off a pretty emotional win in overtime, could be looking for a letdown game in week 2. Now, I don't think a Dan Campbell-led team is really one that will be primed and susceptible to a letdown game, but if it was ever going to happen, it'd be hosting Matt Stafford, the longtime line, in week 1 opening night at home, again in an overtime game in pretty thrilling fashion. I'm just saying, don't look past the Bucs as a slouch of a team. I think -7, while you could see the Lions beating anyone in this league by 7 points, really, with how good they've been the past season, plus that I just think it's a little too rich. Now, I think the Lions are going to be playing many non-playoff teams this season, and you might be able to get, and will be able to get, better value down the road in the season. Another playoff team that I want to talk about would be the Eagles hosting the Falcons. Had this one highlighted for a couple of reasons. One, Eagles coming off a pretty big win, albeit in Brazil. I would imagine this team's pretty tired from the travel, as this was the longest game distance-wise away from American soil played to date. Just the fact of traveling that far and the toll that takes on you makes me believe that maybe the Eagles would be sluggish. They're likely missing a day or day and a half, half day or full day of practice because of that additional travel. And the other reason I highlighted this is because I think it's really hard to get a gauge on the Falcons, even for the past year plus. They have the talents on both sides of the football, and it's really rare for the team to put it all together, but sometimes invariably they do. I really do like the Eagles as a football team. I think they're only going to get better as the season goes on. But you saw Jalen Hurts throw 2 interceptions against the Packers defense. He had a lot of great production out of Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown, but I just think there's a little bit cause for concern for the Eagles here. I don't think it's as good as nearly as many of the picks above or even below on the board. So I'm not saying it's a bad pick. I just think -6.5, given the variability of both the Falcons and Eagles over the last half a season, dating back to when the Eagles had that slide at the end of 2023, just a little bit of cause for concern there. And finally goes to the best pick here, and I do think this best pick is a lot better than the best pick last week. The Ravens here over the Raiders at home, absolutely the best pick. If you don't want to have to worry a single second this week about your Survivor pick, I'm going to knock on wood, you are picking the Ravens this week. I have not been as confident in a pick in a long time here. I think the Ravens are an incredible football team. They were an inch away from tying or beating the Chiefs in week 1, and that was on the road in one of the most difficult places to play. Now they're at home. They're facing a Raiders team that doesn't have many weapons on offense, especially with their quarterback Gardner Minshew throwing to them. You definitely can make the argument that the Raiders have some weapons, but it's hard to utilize them given the talent at quarterback and their offensive line. They lost to the Chargers, and I was really unimpressed with the way the Raiders played. On the other hand, I think the Ravens played fairly good football. I was actually happy with their offensive performance and a little bit let down by their defense. But I think the Ravens here are going to jump back in a big way at home against the Raiders. There was absolutely no chance that the Ravens started 0-2 under John Harbaugh, under Lamar Jackson, under this great defensive regime. I am so confident in the Ravens here, and you should be too if you're looking for a safe, no-sweat pick this week. Now, just because the Ravens are a no-sweat pick doesn't mean that's exactly what you want to pick this week. Perhaps you're looking for some value here, and I think you get a ton of value in the Chargers playing the Panthers here. There's going to be a handful of teams this season that when teams are playing against them, you're going to hone in on. Those teams are likely, I still believe the Patriots are one of them. The Panthers are certainly that team, and just like the value pick last week, the Broncos are a team that you want to pick on too. But right here, you get the Chargers, who are not an above-average football team, in my opinion. Certainly in rebuild mode, as they had a top 5 pick in the draft last year, albeit because of a little bit of hurt quarterback play. You get them on the road against the Panthers, who got decimated by the Saints, and their offense, which I would argue isn't too dissimilar from the Chargers, where I think they have a couple guys in place, but not a complete offensive unit. And certainly the Saints have a pretty shoddy O-line. But they were still able to just pick apart this Panthers defense and hold them to some pretty few points on offense, with Bryce Young looking pitiful as the Panthers quarterback here. I will say, especially if you watch this channel for a couple of years, I have very little faith in the Chargers. I think this is a great value pick, but I have been burned time and time again, whether it be my own personal bets or in Survivor with the Chargers, and this is an incredibly risky value play, even though it's -6.5, because it's on the road and it's because of the Chargers. Now, this is a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, and a new paradigm shift in LA with this team, which I do believe will help them. I think they have a much more sustainable and low volatile offense, really, with the way this team wants to run the football between the tackles. It is just the MO of Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh over there in LA. But again, I've seen the Chargers time and time again burn me. So this is a value play, but this is also a pretty risky play as well. You look at the Chargers' schedule ahead. I like to avoid road games unless you're playing the legitimate worst team in football, which is what Carolina is right now. You could also circle them for on the road versus Denver in a few weeks, but I don't like taking teams against divisional opponents if I don't have to. Then you start to scan a little bit more for a favorable home matchup. I think you could argue they get it against Tennessee, but I still wouldn't be that confident in that, and I guarantee the Chargers wouldn't be favored by -6.5 against Tennessee at home. So I don't see a lot of spots for them at home against non-divisional opponents. I really think that -6.5, all else equal, as of right now, will be the highest favorite the Chargers are this season, given their current schedule and given the health of the teams that they're playing right now. But if you're looking for something different, you want to hear my opinion on the other games, I'll go through the few more on this list. Here you got the Cowboys -6.5, 74% chance to win at home against the Saints. I think some people would be a little bit off-put by the way the Saints played, but I'm really chalking it up to just horrendous talent on both sides of the football for the Panthers. I don't love this pick for the Cowboys because the Saints had a pretty solid offense, and they're going to keep competing for the division title in a pretty weak division. But I think the Cowboys are far away the better team. Their defense really is in the elite level in this NFL season, in this league. What concerns me a little bit is always going to be the run game for the Cowboys, but as long as their defense is playing the way that they are, they're a pretty safe pick. Again, consult the schedule, but again, I don't think I love the Cowboys in this spot because there are going to be plenty of opportunities where they get favored by double digits, especially because of that defense. And I don't think you can say the same about some of the spreads for these other teams. And that other team, kind of that I alluded to, would be the Texans here. While I think the Texans are a really great team, I don't think they're as dominant on either side of the football as the Cowboys are, at least defensively. I think the Texans are a very well-balanced team that you're going to see get favored by this 6.5, probably 7.5 point a lot this season. Whereas the Cowboys, as I just mentioned, I would expect them to be double-digit favorites a handful of times this year. I like the Texans here actually a lot this week if you're thinking about something different than what I mentioned. They're playing the Bears at home in a primetime Sunday night matchup. This is going to be Caleb Williams' first time in a primetime game under national eye. And this is coming off a week against the Titans where the Bears offense specifically and Caleb Williams put up 0 points, relied completely on their defense and special teams to score, and Caleb Williams failed to throw 100 yards. The Bears cannot count on their defense special teams to put up 14 points for them. And I think they're, again, going to struggle against the Texans here, especially if Caleb Williams does anything similar to what he did in week 1. Now, Williams would have to likely throw for 250 at the minimum this game if the Bears are going to have any chance of competing against the Texans, given how many weapons the Texans have in offense. You see a trio, if not a foursome of great receivers for the Texans on offense, and then Joe Mixon highlighting the running game there. It's just a really complete offense, and they've built this team up well the last few years. I think they're a very complete team, and I don't think you can say that about the Bears. Look no further than how their offensive line performed against a pretty good interior defensive line, and I would say just all-around solid defensive line for the Titans. This Texans defensive line's got some players too. I think they're going to give the Bears some fits for their offensive line. And again, I like the Texans here a lot in week 2. What a tale of 2 weeks for the Bengals. They end week 1 with being the heaviest favorite of any team, being favored by 8 points, and then they go on the road against Kansas City and are only favored by 6. Many people have mentioned it, and if you haven't heard by now, you're probably one of the few. The Bengals have had really slow starts each of the last few seasons with Zach Taylor and with Joe Burrow. If I had to guess, I'm sure if any of you had to guess, that trend would probably continue as they're playing an incredibly tough opponent again in Kansas City against Patrick Mahomes. It's hard to believe the Bengals can go from losing to the Patriots to beating the Chiefs, but that's the NFL sometimes. That being said, I think the Chiefs have an incredibly high chance to win this game, but you never want to bet against Joe Burrow, even earlier in the season. You're going to have Chiefs plenty of times this season, just much like the Cowboys, where they're going to be favored by 10-plus points, where they're going to be facing much less menacing quarterbacks than Joe Burrow. And for that reason, I would stay away. You can choose to bet against the Bengals all you want for their week 1 performance. I'm not going to let 1 week sway my complete opinion on the Bengals. That being said, there's no denying their record and slow start to the year over the past few seasons, so take that as you will. But if it was me, I would not be taking the Chiefs this week, as again, I think they're going to have much easier opponents moving forward. You never know which Bengals team is going to show up, or said differently, you don't know when the real Bengals are going to show up. When is the real Joe Burrow going to show up? And you never know. So for me, just going to stay away here. Other picks here, you get the Vikings on the road. You get the Niners on the road against the Vikings. I remember last year where I was really confident the 49ers were going to beat the Vikings, and the Vikings somehow pulled it out. I think this is probably going to be a different story as you have Sam Darnold at quarterback, and even though he looked absolutely incredible, what looks even better is the 49ers defense. They have just so many playmakers on there. Again, just the 49ers this week is much like the pick last week, where the 49ers only being favored by 5.5 points is completely abnormal. Because part of it is because they're on the road, and part of it is because the Vikings look so solid. Again, I would have a hard time thinking that the Niners lose this game. I don't think strategically it's the right time to take them in Survivor, especially given how many other teams above them in this list seem like really good picks. And I think the same thing of what I just said about the Niners can be said about the Jets here. great defense as well. They didn't look great at times Monday night against the 49ers, but no one looks good against the 49ers at times. I still think this Jets team's got a ton of talent on both sides of the football and still one of the scariest defenses in the NFL. You saw the Titans, again, lose to the Bears when the Bears' offense was able to put up 0 points. I don't think that necessarily means you want to take the Jets here. I still think the Jets are better than perhaps what we saw against the 49ers because the 49ers were just so dominant and just so well prepared with their coaching and everything that goes into their preparation. So I don't think it's the right time to take the Jets here either. If they were at home, I think this would be a no-brainer, as you see the Jets be favored by 10 points here. But I just think on the road, again, with so many better picks above them in this list, it's probably good to stay away. Now, I realize I didn't do this last week, and I'm probably going to get some slack for it in the comments, but I'm going to start doing my pick and what I would personally choose, just so it's abundantly clear where I stand. I think this week, though it pains me so much, I would pick and will pick the Chargers this week. And if they lose this game, I'm never, ever really picking them as long as Justin Herbert is their quarterback. But again, it doesn't get more valuable than this. Chargers being a below average team, being favored basically by a touchdown, that doesn't happen very often. And the only reason it's happening is because they're playing potentially the worst team in football here. I remember I looked ahead at other weeks. There are some tough weeks in week 5 and 6 where I think I'm going to want the Ravens in my back pocket, along with like the Texans, who are heavily considered picking too. So that leads me to pick the Chargers here with a lot of value. I don't think I would otherwise pick them at any point this season, given the schedule. So that's where I stand. Obviously, you're going to make your own opinion. I'm only here for you to have additional support and context for each game this week. Best of luck in week 2, and I hope with all luck that we can see everyone back in week 3. Good luck, everyone.